at 6:30, so I would like to call the Baldwin City Council work session for March 4th to order, please. The first order of business is a public hearing, Fieldale Farm zoning ordinance number 2025-02161Z. If there are any Baldwin residents who would like to speak in favor of the zoning ordinance change, please come forward. Or any people here who would like to speak in favor of it? Okay. Would anybody like to speak in opposition? Okay. Alice, so you know there's nobody in the gallery other than representatives from for Fieldale. So I'm going to leave the public hearing open for 20 minutes. Okay, and then if anybody comes in, so around 6:51, I'll see if anybody else is here. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to old business, discussion of the master fee schedule. Ms. Woodmaster.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
We are finally bringing this back to council. In your packet, it is on page 20. We brought this up last spring with the hopes of getting everything adopted for this current fiscal year, but it took us just a little bit longer to get the water and sewer use ordinance updated. That was updated at the end of last year, so now we're ready to put forth the master fee schedule with a few modifications that we at City Hall have proposed. We'll talk through those again tonight. The last time we talked about this, I believe, was in April of last year, so it has been a little while, but if there is anything that the City Council would like for us to consider, we're happy to do that. The goal is to have this fee schedule amended for the fiscal year 2026, effective July 1. So on page 20, you'll see that we have clarified the consumption on premises for alcohol. So it's malts, wine, and distilled spirits. There's 3 different fees for that. That's just clarifying what's in our ordinance now. And then if you jump down to miscellaneous fees, we have an annual building inspection. Per inspection is $75, and then alcohol beverage permit, employee permit with fingerprints is $50. So if they're serving, they have to be fingerprinted. On page 21, we've added the peddlers, canvassers, and solicitors fee. That's $100. It requires a solicitor badge. This has come up a couple of times in the past, as it's not often that we get peddlers who want to come through, but it is good practice, especially as the city is growing, and if somebody wants to come through and sell a product, just as long as they come to City Hall, get that permit, they have a badge that they'll get from us, so that when they do knock on a door, that whoever's answering the door understands that they did come to the city. We know who they are. It's not a stranger, and they're safe to engage with. So that is being added as well. And then on page 22, we added the cemetery coping permanent structure permit. We have seen an increase in this over the last couple of years. And it does take some time out of City Hall schedules to go out there and make sure that it's being plotted correctly, that we're interacting with the contractor that's coming out to lay the coping. So this is just accommodating that time that it takes to ensure that they have installed their permanent structures appropriately. Has everyone been out to the cemetery? So you guys understand why this is important.
I'm trying to delay my visit.
Listen. Happy to give you a tour if you want. There are a number of sites that are, at a 75-degree angle. There's some places that there is no real order or organization to it. And so this is helping to create that if somebody wants to install coping, that is great. Here's where that will be. So we're going to lay that out for them. So that is being added. And then we also have under building and planning a zoning verification letter. It's not, again, we get these requests. It's not often, but when we do, it takes us 30, 45, sometimes an hour to complete. a zoning verification letter. This is not to be confused with somebody sending us an email saying, what is zoned, what is this zoned? We're happy to answer that question. All we're doing is looking at a map and responding to that. But zoning verification requests entail, recordings of any violations from code compliance, if there was certificates of occupancy issued. There's a number of things that go into a zoning verification letter. So this is just accommodating the time at City Hall. Under residential permits, we have the accessory structure shell. The CO is not required. That is a $70 fee. We have a $75 application fee or the administrative fee for a standard building that is going up. But if somebody's just building the shell of a structure, there's some gray area in what they're paying for, especially with like a reduction in like if they're not building out the electrical or plumbing or stuff like that. So this is just accommodating the amount of work that we're doing that's actually less than what we would do on a typical project. Then we have the accessory structure build out where a CO is required. In this particular instance, this would be like someone's work shed that has electrical and plumbing installed in it. So that's the difference there. Then we have a certificate of occupancy that's a temporary. We don't actually have a fee for this established, but there are certain scenarios where this is appropriate if they're waiting on a contractor to bring something that has been on back order for 6 months. If it's something that we're willing, that can be accommodated, we want to be able to give them that certificate of occupancy so that they can close on that property, because you have to have a CO in order to close. So that gives us the flexibility if something does happen, that would be an extra, scenario for that particular build. This gives us the ability to actually issue that permit. That will require, it ultimately requires that they come back and get a permanent CO, but there's not an additional fee for that. So they're just paying an additional $50 on that permit fee to accommodate that temporary status. All right, moving on to the concept plan review. Prior to the application, this is a $75 fee. We get this a lot. We spend a lot of time reviewing applications and the idea of what somebody's wanting to do, and we're having to sit down to talk through all of that with the developer, whoever's wanting to come in. For example, we have someone who wants to build an event center. We've spent probably 4 or 5 hours with them just talking through what that looks like, if it's possible, how to connect with water and sewer, and that takes time that wasn't anticipated. So this is just accommodating that as well. It is a standard fee. This is what we would charge for the administrative fee on any project. So $75 on that one. And then we have an application resubmission fee after it's been returned once. That's $35. The city requires a completed application. So if there's a box that has information that is needed and it's not filled out, that's not a complete application. But what happens, a developer will bring it in. Sometimes things get forgotten, which is why we have that submission in there, that it might have been an oversight or somebody forgot to sign. But there are a number of scenarios where we send it back and forth 5 and 6 times because they didn't put the project site address, or they didn't list the contractor's general contractor's license information, or their driver's license wasn't up to date, or they sent us an expired business license. Like all of these things are on a checklist. There's a requirement, and so to have that checklist, to have the application, and to miss it more than once, we're having to go out of our way to make sure that it's accommodated. I couldn't tell you how many times I've watched Aaron highlight somebody's application, say, "Hey, can you please fill this out?" Like, I want to help you, but I can't help you if I don't know the information. And so there is that fee that comes after there's been one return submission. So if you submit it to me and it's incorrect, we'll give it to you one time, and then anytime after that, it's a $35 fee. All right, and then we have the certificate of completion. This is really just a point of clarification. We have a certificate of occupancy, but really and truly, you should only be issuing a certificate of occupancy if somebody's going to occupy the premise. And so there are situations where somebody's building an outbuilding that doesn't require occupancy and it's just for storage. We're issuing COs for that, but really they just need to be a certificate of completion that the project is done. So it's the same fee as a certificate of occupancy. It is just letting everyone know that this project has been completed. We're almost done, I promise. Everything else has been established. Then on page 24, we have a black box request for $50. For those of you who don't know what a black box request is, this is in our utility billing department. If somebody, let me back up. We have meters that are radio read meters that capture 90 days worth of water usage. So if somebody is trying to figure out where a leak happened or if there's excessive usage and they just can't pinpoint where it is, we can actually draw that information from their meter, and we can go back 90 days. It requires that somebody go out there with the device, take it out there, complete the reading, bring it back to City Hall, and then somebody from accounts receivable is actually going through that data, pulling up the account, making sure everything is there, printing off that. We do a lot of these, and I love that we have this. It is a great tool. It helps keep, it gives us the support that we need to help people find their leaks that they may not have been able to find. So before we had the radio read meters, you would go out and read a meter and there would be a little triangle spinning really fast. That's how you knew you had a leak. Well, our meters now can tell you if there's an intermittent leak, if there's a continuous leak, but it's also going to tell you by the minute where that water is going. So if you can see that you guys were on vacation for a week and there was 500 gallons a day being run while you were on vacation, either somebody is at your home accessing 500 gallons of water, or you might have a leak, or you have a toilet running, or whatever. So we've actually solved a number of, we can't find it just by the black box alone. The reason for the fee is because we have some individuals who want a black box every single month because they don't trust that the meter is working. Or we've gone out there 3 or 4 times and it's pulling the same data just a couple of days later, so you're adding a couple of days to it. When it's different when the city is going out there to do this, to help investigate and try to find a leak. We don't go on citizens' property. So it is very difficult for us to assist in finding the leak. We can guide. We can say, hey, have you looked here? Have you checked this? Have you turned this off? But short of actually going on the property and walking it with them, this is all we have. And we don't mind doing that, but when it becomes excessive and we're doing this over and over and over again, we're stopping what we're doing throughout the week to accommodate this request that isn't solving anything. There's no leak. It's just data collection. So we're adding a $50 fee to that after a courtesy check. This is not going to be applied in the event that the city is requesting it. If we're asking a staff member to go out there, that is not how the fee is applied. It is only if the customer is requesting after we have done it one time for them. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it is time consuming, and we are extrapolating that data for them. I will say that hopefully in this next fiscal year, we will have upgraded to our cloud system for our meters, and we'll be able to access that information a little bit quicker. So right now it's being downloaded into a software. When we turn over to the cloud system, it'll actually allow us to pull it from an internet website instead of it being from our software. So it'll make it a little bit quicker. So we added that fee as well, and then on the last page, there is the high strength wastewater surcharge. This was the reason that we were waiting to adopt this last year. This is directly from our water and sewer use ordinance. This is if there is industrial waste, the maximum levels that they're allowed to maintain, and if there's not, what the surcharge will be for that. So on this one, it calls out the section. It's 2.9 of the water and sewer use ordinance. But then we did put the calculation on there just for reference. There was a lot. Any questions about the fees that we proposed?
I didn't see the fee for a lemonade stand, but.
If you would like for me to add it, happy to.
Oh, you know my position on this, but.
Yeah.
So just to clarify on the black box, that's after the first courtesy check.
Yeah, so if we're trying to investigate a leak, we will not be charging a fee for that. We're trying to help the customer. This is if a customer has come in, has requested a black box, and then the next month has requested another one.
I know
It doesn't, again, it does not happen often, but when it does, it is time consuming.
Yeah.
if you've not seen the data, talk to Emily. It's amazing what can be
It's
pulled.
very detailed.
There are graphs, there are times, there are charts. It really can show you what's going on in your home. So I was having an issue and she pulled mine and she's like, look at this. I was like, wow. I had no idea you had that much information about my home. So.
Yeah, we actually, a couple of months ago, well, I guess it was last summer now, we had one of our apartment complexes was having an issue. A ton of water usage, we couldn't figure it out, it was abnormal, but we had changed out their meter by the time they'd come to speak to us, and so we didn't have the data. Well, come to find out, we can still pull that data from the meter, even though the meter is no longer in the ground. So as long as it's in there, we can pull it. So we had the software company help us pull that data, and we were able to see that there was actually a backflow problem. So water was actually coming back into the meter. So they were getting charged double for the water in that old meter because the meter had broken. Something inside of it, the impeller stopped, and it was just letting water go through it over and over and over again. It doesn't happen often, but when you pull the black box, it shows you that there's a negative water usage, which is impossible unless something is wrong. And so when we tested the meter on the bench, that's exactly what happened. And so that, a perfect storm of things happened. We changed the meter out trying to solve the problem. It solved the problem, but then we were trying to figure out what the initial problem was to give them credit back on their account. We don't want anybody to pay for water that they haven't actually used. And so, but we needed that proof behind it to show that this is why we're giving this discount. It's not really a discount. They never should have been charged that in the first place. And so we were able to use the information from that black box in order to fix that account. It's really helpful. We also, I don't know that any of you have experienced a water leak that caused me to help you figure out how to find the water leak, but there have been a few times with customers where we run this test. I think Alice has heard about this, but you spend about 20 or 25 minutes in your home. You turn all of your valves off, and then one at a time you open them. You don't turn anything on, you just open the valve, let it run for a minute or so, and then turn it off and record that time. And you go through all of the valves in your home, you record those times, and then you bring those times to City Hall. We'll run a black box, and then figure out at what point did water start running through that meter to find out, it's when you opened up the valve in your upstairs bathroom.
Yes.
That's your leak. So we've been able to do that. It's time consuming, but we can help. We have the data to do it, so let's do that. And so there's been, at least that I've been a part of in the last 2 years, at least 10 water leaks that have been discovered that way. So it really is a very helpful tool.
And sometimes it's determined that the leak is happening in the ground between the meter and the house, which frustrates people. They can't figure it out. There's nothing leaking in the home. They got butters out. But doing that trick can show if there's a leak between the house and the meter in the ground, which can be intermittent and really tricky.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you for putting this together.
Of course.
So this will come up Monday?
If you are prepared for it to come up Monday, we're happy to bring it forward Monday.
Are we okay with Monday?
Yes, that's fine.
And then if it's approved on Monday, this is something that would go on the city clerk's page?
Yes,
Where
but
would
my
this be?
recommendation is not to impose these fees until July 1.
Right, eventually when it, okay.
I have one question. On the peddlers, canvassers, and solicitors fee, many years ago when I was realtor in another area, realtors had to get fingerprinted and sign up for peddlers licenses. And I'm wondering, not everybody it would seem would be considered a peddler.
No,
in this
not,
instance.
it's listed in our ordinance for
Oh, do you have a
licenses,
list?
yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
what
and
I was
realtors are
wondering.
not on there. No, I can send you that list though, we do have that.
Okay.
This is truly somebody who's selling a product, a good, a service, or offering ideological hope, religious hope, something to that effect, so.
Okay, so Monday it is.
Okay.
All right, there being no other business, and it is now public hearing has been open for 20 minutes. I will call one more time. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the zoning change, please come forward. Seeing none, anybody in opposition to the zoning change, please come forward. There being none, I'm going to close the public hearing for the zoning change. All right, moving on to announcements. Homestead exemption affidavits for 2025 property taxes are due April 1st. If you do not have a homestead exemption, stop by City Hall or call 706-778-6341 to find out the exemption for which you qualify. If you have a city exemption but not a county exemption, contact the county clerk. Ms. Woodmaster, what do people need to bring with them to get the homestead exemption?
Driver's license?
Driver's license that has the address of the property in which they
Yeah, typically we can pull up who's on it just by looking at Q Public. If you had a recent changeover, you can bring your closing disclosure just to ensure that we have that, but, if it's been turned over at the county.
I don't want people to come, without what they need, so. All right, and second announcement, the Baldwin City Council Spring 2025 Retreat will be April 10th and 11th from 8 to 5 p.m. Formal notice and agenda to follow. Do we have a location for that?
It's at the Habersham office for EMI.
Habersham office for EMI on Luthi Road, and public is always welcome. Do we have any announcements from council? Any announcements from staff?
I actually would like to, I had a few people reach out to me from the Banks County side, down the mountain, water customers. Well, it's frustrating to not have water or to deal with these breaks. They wanted me to express to the city and our public works people that they appreciate how hard they work. They recognize that they have to work nonstop on these water leaks, which means that they work well into the night, and that they're just very thankful for that.
Absolutely, so that's where I was going, and Councilwoman Davis and I had spoken earlier today that we've both received kudos for our staff, but concerns as well from citizens.
Yes.
Something that citizens would like us to bring forward, not so much about the work that the staff has done in face of this horrific water event that started last Wednesday for us, but they were more concerned about the way information is conveyed to citizens, and a number of folks have asked me to discuss with council and staff, is there another way that information can be conveyed? And so we've talked about in the past emergency systems like a Nixle system, and I let people know that this is something that we could add to the budget, and I know that staff is currently looking into the cost of that for the budget conversations that are coming up. Did you want to add anything, Councilwoman Davis? Okay, and did you hear anything from folks?
I mean, the usual that's on social media. My biggest concern is that this is, social media is a pretty good way of disseminating information. My concern is that the city spends the money and takes it out of the budget to have additional ways of disseminating information in regards to water events and whatnot, and it still won't be good enough. It's the classic case if the squeaky wheel gets the oil. When it comes to comments on social media and such, that there are just cases where no matter what the city does, it will not be good enough. And I don't want to use taxpayers' money to get another system in place on top of what's already there, if it's not really going to change the scope of the situation.
I spoke to some older residents who don't go on social media, don't even use computers. I mean, my mom's a perfect example. And so they were asking for push notices on their phone, which they do have.
Gotcha.
So we have talked a lot about our seniors and how we can accommodate needs that the seniors have. So it'll be interesting to see when, you know, when we get information back on what a Nixle-like system would cost, with 3,600 residents, you know, is that $1, $2 a piece? I mean, or are we looking at $100 a piece? I don't know. I don't know what this will look like, but I think for an immediate, need, like your water is being turned off at 2 o'clock and it's now 1 o'clock, or we have a leak, or for the seniors who don't go on the computer with frequency, I think it might alleviate a lot of grief and help people plan.
There's only one customer, but it's important that, you know, for them to be notified because we have medical equipment that depends on our clean water. And so if there's a boil water notice, they need to be notified, you know, just as soon as we have the information because it causes them to have to go on antibiotics, you know, maybe unnecessarily if they've got proper notice. So, and it's just one customer, but one is you know, enough. It's important for us to be able to get that information out. I know some counties, Raven County has a code red service, and so if they've got your phone number, if you sign up for the information, if there's a fire or if there's storms are coming, or if the road closure or ice, you know, ice or snow or issues, anything like that, they call and text whatever phone number. And so I think that's a great, I don't know what that calls, but I think that's a great thing for you know, residents to be able to have for emergency notices of any kind.
Yeah, Alice, Ms. Woodmaster was nodding her head yes, and she said that Habersham County has code red as well.
Oh, good.
So-
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, we need to sign up for that. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it makes, but we're like 1,000 feet from the Habersham line, so, yeah.
Well, we did actually meet with that citizen, who needs assistance or prior notification. I met with her yesterday, Friday? What time's it here? But we went through all of the process that she goes through to accommodate, their medical devices. And we've added them, just so that everyone is aware, we've added them to the mail outlet, the email list, that goes out to media for boil water advisories. And she was happy with, that resolution, at least for now, until we can get something that will go directly to her phone.
Awesome.
But yeah, I was like, you're gonna get every notice that goes out, it might not impact you. But I told her that, when something does impact where you live, not only will you get that email from, for the boil water advisor, but you'll get a phone call from either myself or the public works director, because we're both aware of it. It's in our phone, it's saved in there, so, hopefully we don't have that issue. And they do have a backup, system, they just need to know that that's what they have to use. And that, yeah, because without going into all the details, they batch their stuff. So thankfully, they started their batch on Monday, just before the leak happened, so they were okay. But it is still any alteration in the water that they're using can change the chemical makeup of the medicines that are going into his product. And so there's a lot that goes into it. So we worked out a plan, and hopefully we won't have that issue going forward. But it does, you know, we might only have one customer now, but we could have 10, 15, 20 in the next 5 years. And so I do think it's important that we have a means to communicate this other than Facebook. Not everyone has Facebook. Not everyone is
confused.
every hour looking at our website. And so I do know that it's presented challenges.
You know, I rarely look at that, and that's another way that we disseminate information.
And we send it to
actually
the
do have
media.
an agreement with the elementary school as well. I don't know that we really utilize it very much, but they have an electronic sign that the city helped pay for, in exchange for us being able to put notices like boil water notices up, so, but you forget to look out.
Okay. Thank you for that, Alice.
Yes, there was an issue in my neighborhood. There's a private water system there, however, it comes from Baldwin. And, one of the neighbors asked if we were under boil advisory, the amount of water was reduced. And we contacted Utilities Inc. and we're told no. And that didn't seem right to me. And so I'm wondering, is for neighborhoods that have their own utility systems, are those companies that provide the water that they get from Baldwin contacted? They are.
Yeah.
So how are they contacted?
We call them. So we contact utility services when that happens. It's them, and then we have one other, it's Heritage Gardens, but we notify all of them when this happens, the Boil Water Advisory.
Yeah, in the past, we've gotten phone calls from them, message, there's 2 or 3 ways that they reach out to the customers, but this time there was none, so.
Boil Water Advisories, I'd be interested to talk to Scott about that, but the Boil Water Advisory typically is out of precaution, and out of an abundance of caution, because of loss in pressure. So if your system didn't experience any pressure loss, then you would be fine.
It did.
So if it did impact it, then I would absolutely recommend boiling water. The reason for it, without getting into too much detail, but when there's a loss in water pressure, the force, the velocity of the water going through the pipe is gone, and so any of the sediment that has gathered in that pipe from the life of that pipe is pressed up against the sides. If you think about how quickly something goes and it's pressed to the side, but when you lose that pressure, that sediment kind of joins the water that's still remaining in there. So when you add pressure back to it, it's going to push all of that sediment out into the system. And which is why we recommend, if you lose that pressure, to go ahead and boil that water to ensure that any of the organic materials that are in there are boiled out. So whenever there's a loss in pressure, if you feel like if there's a trickle coming out of your water spigot, I recommend, one, notifying the city that we're calling them to boil the water. But I will find out why.
Well, they told us that there was no order in place, yes, that's great.
Okay, okay. I need
Oh,
to vote.
cleanup day. Cleanup day is April 19th. Is that our calendar?
Payment day, April 19th.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you. How many years is this?
26.
That's exciting. Keep Georgia, keep Baldwin peachy clean. All right, I need a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Councilman Venter. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Councilman Keith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.